close now. The story I'm about to tell you is not for the faint of heart. It's the tale of a terror that gripped a small town not too far from here. A town called Wailing Woods, an ordinary place where families lived peaceful lives. That is, until the beast arrived. But before that nightmare began, there is another story, lost to the passages of time, the story of witches, curses, and dark magic. And at the center of it all is Margaret Blackthorn, the last witch of the Wailing Woods coven. Margaret's story begins long before the town of Wailing Woods ever stood. The forest was her home, and the coven her family. For centuries, they lived in secrecy in the forest, conducting rituals under the moonlight, speaking with the spirits of the forest, and weaving spells that helped keep the delicate balance between the natural world and the supernatural forces they served. From a young age, though, it was clear that Margaret was different. She possessed powers unlike any of her sisters. She could command the wind with a whisper, call animals to her side with a mere thought, and even bend the will of the forest itself to her desires. The elder witches feared Margaret's gifts, for they sensed in her a desire for more than just communion with nature. They sensed ambition. Margaret wanted to control the natural world. The coven disagreed. Margaret had seen the town of Wailing Woods grow beyond the edges of the forest, encroaching on the land that had once belonged to the coven. She had seen townsfolk chop trees, build houses, and claim the wilderness for themselves. This infuriated Margaret. She wanted to walk amongst them and teach them the ways of peace and harmony, and the importance of the nature they were tearing down. So one day she decided to meet these townsfolk. She was not greeted with open arms, for they feared her, and cast her back into the forest. The other witches warned Margaret to let the humans be, and remain hidden in the shadows. But Margaret would not listen. She began to practice dark magic. Magic that was forbidden even amongst the witches. In her pursuit to control the natural world, she delved into rituals that called upon the powers of chaos and wrath. She wanted to control the village and make them fear her and the natural world that they sought to defile. The other witches, upon discovering Margaret's plans, tried to stop her, and in the dead of night they confronted her, begging her to turn from her dangerous path before it was too late. But Margaret had already gone too far. She had summoned an ancient and terrible power, one that could not be tamed. And when the witches tried to stop her, she turned on them, unleashing her dark magic upon them in a rage. The ground shook beneath their feet, the trees groaned as if in pain, and the wind howled through the woods. "If I cannot rule, I will destroy," Margaret vowed, her voice echoing through the trees. "I will become the terror in the night, the thing they fear in the shadows. They will know my name and tremble before the beast of Wailing Woods." And with that, Margaret began the darkest spell of all, one that would bind her very soul to the forest itself. As she began her incantation, her body began to change. Her bones cracked and elongated. Her skin sprouted a coarse, dark fur, and her hands twisted into long, sharp claws. Her eyes burned with an unnatural light, and her body was consumed, replaced by the massive hulking shape of a bear. A creature not born of nature, but of dark magic and vengeance. The other witches wanted to stop the transformation before it was too late, and Margaret lashed out at them. The beast tore through the coven with a furious brutality, and all the witches that had once been sisters were slaughtered, their bodies scattered through the woods. And with the coven now gone, and Margaret fully in the form of the beast, set her sights on the town of Wailing Woods. At first, the townsfolk noticed only strange things in the forest. A shadow moving through the trees, a growl deep in the dark, or the snapping of twigs. They knew something was out there. And then the disappearances started. At first, there was a farmer who had left one evening in search of his missing livestock. He did not return. In the morning, his body was found, or what was left of it. His limbs torn open, his chest carved into as if by claws of some unknown large creature, and his face frozen in a look of terror. The mayor of the town had said this was some wild animal attack. A wolf, maybe. Perhaps even a bear. But the townsfolk knew better, and they whispered of the story of the witch that had turned into a beast and was roaming the forest. The disappearances continued. Another was a young woman found dead in the town square, her body contorted in strange angles, her throat sliced. Another was a merchant traveling through the forest, vanished without a trace, his horse found aimlessly wandering, its saddle torn and bloody. The townsfolk feared the worst. They could hear something. A shadow, the snapping of twigs, the thudding of heavy footsteps. They knew they were being hunted, but they did not know the truth. That the beast was actually Margaret Blackthorne herself, cursed to roam the land, her soul twisted by the dark magic. She had become the thing she sought to control, a creature of rage and destruction. And even though her body was no longer her own, her mind remained sharp, and her desire for vengeance undiminished. She would not stop until the town was on its knees. On Hallows Eve, the town reached its breaking point. They boarded themselves inside, huddling together in their homes. And a group of brave, or perhaps rather foolish, townsfolk decided the time was nigh to face the beast once and for all. They armed themselves with weapons and torches, and they marched forth into the forest. Not a single soul returned. The only sound that came back to the village was a scream, a long, blood-curdling wail echoing through the woods. A scream so filled with terror that it sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. The town did not know what to do. It remained frozen in fear. They say that when the moon is out and the wind howls, they could hear her voice, Margaret's voice, but now a deep, guttural growl carried on the wind, a voice that promised death to those who crossed her path. Years passed. The beast never left. The disappearances slowed, but they never stopped. And the forest, once lush and green, became a dark, twisted place. The trees barren and gnarled, the air heavy with an unnatural chill. And the townsfolk refused to enter the woods anymore. And now, here we are. The moon is out, just like it was when Margaret first cursed this place. The wind howling once more. They say that Margaret still roams these forests, always watching, always waiting. Can you hear her? Can you hear her prowling, looking for her next prey? Do you hear the sound? The sound of the beast. The beast has returned! Ah, save me! No!